Hello, everybody. I think you can all hear me. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Doneen Arquines. I am an executive producer and showrunner, and today I'm moderating the panel on Attendance Not Optional. What does professionalism mean in the workplace? Thank you for your attendance and being on time. I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panel of guests, starting here with Paul Barrett, sports editor for the Seattle Times. Do you want to go ahead and give them a little information on your connection here to WSU and what you do?
Yeah, this is on or not. Here we are. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. My name is Paul Barrett. I'm the sports editor at the Seattle Times. I've been at the Times for 10 years. I graduated from WSU in 1990, a really long time ago, in the journalism program. And I've worked at various papers across the country. I started out in Walla Walla, went to Yakima, and I won't name them all, but I've worked 4 years at the Miami Herald and 10 years at the Arizona Republic, and I'm just thrilled to be here today.
And next to Paul is Marcia Steele Hoover. She is marketing executive, and you spent a lot of your career at Nike. You want to talk a little bit about that?
You bet. So I was I graduated from Murrow, broadcast journalism, spent lots of years in many different roles with many different titles, but I spent the majority of my career with Nike, leading our global internal communications for our 75,000 employees. And I retired after 15 years in 2021, and I currently have my own strategic advisory firm called Chamberlain Consulting. I also happen to be the vice chair of the Murrow Professional Advisory Board, and working with Sarah Stout, I kind of help her lead, if you will, as chair for the Murrow Mentoring Program.
Thank you. And next to Marcia is David Lee, the executive director of Cascade PBS.
Yeah, hi. So I'm actually the executive editor of Cascade PBS. So that's in Seattle. I run our newsroom and our original productions, which consists of both video and podcasts. I came up in the business as a sports anchor. We were just chatting a little bit about that. In Manhattan, in LA, San Francisco markets, Memphis, and then left sports to work my way back up into news because my daughter at the time was in high school, and I wanted to be around her while she was going through high school and choosing where she wanted to go to college. And then worked my way back up to be a news director in Tallahassee and Green Bay, and then finally over to Seattle to run the news and original productions at Cascade PBS. I do not have a Cougar connection, other than we have a lot of Cougars in our organization, and so I'm supposed to say go Cougs.
Yes.
I was going to say, you're an honorary Cougar.
And Liz Pritchard, the retired media executive. You spent a lot of times in sales, I believe. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I'm actually the broadcast journalism major from, 1980, who went on her internship and decided to switch gears. I was working at Como TV on my internship, and I kept seeing these reporters taking the police scanner home at night and putting it under their pillows because they were going to chase down fires and accidents. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that. I don't have the dedication. So I was a pretty good writer. But I kept also seeing people walk around the television station wearing really cool 80s power suits and carrying briefcases and driving very nice cars. And I'm like, who are those people? And they go, that's the ad sales department. And it clicked, oh, it's the money. Oh, I get it. You can't hire top name talent. You can't buy a news helicopter or new programming unless the sales department brings in the revenue. So suddenly something clicked. I'm like, I'd like to spend a little time there before I go back to school. And it ended up being my career. So I worked in Seattle. I went to Chicago in 1985. It was the Bears, 86 Bears, that won the Super Bowl that year, and spent 14 years there. And then I went to London for a few years with my husband for his work, but we came back to the States, worked in Chicago briefly, but I ended my last 20 years with the Fox television station group in New York City, running ad sales training program for all the stations that we owned across the country. I would highly recommend sales, a lot of fun.
Great, thank you so much. Well, as you know, this panel is called Attendance Not Optional, so we're going to kind of start with that and talking about attendance. You know, they say there's a saying that 80% of success is showing up, and you know, appreciate you guys showing up here. And I just wanted to talk to the panel a little bit about, you know, why that's so important. First of all, for first impressions, you know, on a new job, and also kind of becoming somebody who is reliable in the workforce. Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, one of the things that I've found is that it's the simple things. Doing those will really set you apart from a lot of other people. Being reliable, knowing that people, you know, when people know they can count on you, that's very important, and you'll really set yourself apart. Being on time for work and meetings, meeting deadlines. You know, if you're going to be late to a meeting or an event, you know, more than 10 minutes late, let people know about it. Very basic things like that will really put you in a good position with people you're working with and working for. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and if anybody else, if you have any anecdotes that you'd like to share about any memories you have of a time where you had an employee who showed up late and, you know, yeah.
I actually fired someone in New York City for being late 75% of the time. And we didn't fire him until after we'd had multiple conversations about it's disrespectful to your colleagues, to your team, to the work, to come in late every day. And he said, well, isn't there a grace period? And I said, not really. And he said, but you know, my train is often late. He was coming in from Brooklyn. And I go, everybody in New York City has a transit problem once in a while. If you have it every day, you're on the wrong train. And so it didn't work out very well for him. But I do think it's respectful to the work, to the team, and like he just said, you know, people count on you to get things done, so they need to get started. It's really important, and it's so easy to do. Easy to set yourself apart that way.
Great. And, you know, Paul, I think you mentioned something about also responsiveness. You know, in the workplace, if you are, you know, like you said, like people are emailing you, texting you, and if you're not being responsive, you know, how important is that?
Well, it's super important, especially when you're dealing with breaking news. You know, where all of us are working on some sort of a deadline at all times. And whether that's to get something posted online right away, or whether it's for the newspaper, or whether it's just to get a project done by a certain time. And it's really important to communicate and respond to emails. A lot of people, a surprising number of people, like to ignore their emails. And you just can't do that. And people are counting on you to respond in a timely fashion. We use Slack. And so you're expected to respond, you know, when you're working, you're expected to respond as soon as possible because we're on deadline. And texting, calling, you know, you got to pick up the phone when somebody calls you, or call somebody back, you know, in a prompt manner when someone reaches out to you.
Can I tell a little story?
Yes,
Denise?
absolutely.
It's tangential, but it'll make sense. So my summer's off from college. I worked in a 5-star restaurant, and I had lots of different jobs. But when I was waiting tables, people would ask me, you'd serve them their meal, and they'd ask you for a condiment, right? Mustard, mayonnaise, horseradish, whatever. I learned very quickly that people will not eat their food until they have that condiment, right? Because everybody wants to have whatever with their fries or whatever with their prime rib. And I learned that if I was responsive and I immediately went and got that condiment and brought it back to them, that my tip was way higher than getting distracted and having to go do something else, and then all of a sudden they're having to ask me again for that condiment, and then all of a sudden my tip goes way down. It was an obvious sign to me of the value of being responsive and what I got in return. And I've taken that experience into corporate America, where the exact same thing happens. When you are leading teams, whether you're a part of a team, you have responsibility and accountability to each other as well as yourself. And when you're responsive, people take notice. And then they come to rely on you in ways that you may never have ever imagined. But it's the idea of something so simple, right? And by the way, for those who send emails, if you're across time zones, whatever, and you want an email response, many people just in their, signature line of their email, they'll say something like, I'm sending emails after hours, do not feel like you have to respond right away. So it's not that you have to be on 24 hours a day to other people's needs. You need to set the expectation, and they need to set it of yourself. But you should always be proactive in getting back to people.
That's great. David, working in the news, how do you see this kind of manifesting?
I think it's a couple of things. When you're in the news business, you're getting emails all the time. So I think you also have to set some boundaries for yourselves, and know when you can get to everything, but you do need to get to everything. Not everything deserves, a Gesundheit. Not everything deserves a 20-page response, but the acknowledgement that somebody took the time to send you a note, you have a quick response, even if it's, hey, I want to give you some more on this, but I'm just letting you know right now, it's going to take a day or so, just to let them know too, I think is very important. I think the other thing you can do is you can set up different folders in your phone as things come in. In my job in particular, I get so many things from so many like cities. Like on Fridays, that's a good city dump. They'll send you all of the things that they did for the week, or what's ahead, and it's just like the last thing that the press secretary, I think, does on a Friday to bury you for the weekend. But there's a lot of those kind of emails that come in, and after a while, you start to figure out the ones that are ones that you can maybe put aside for a little bit, and then the others that you really do need to respond. But I do think some kind of response is really helpful.
Now, when it comes to deadlines, I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned was if I wasn't going to make it, to ask for help or let somebody know so that I can get it done in time. Have you guys experienced that sort of thing? I think people think of it as a weakness, to ask for help, but can you, go ahead.
Well, the one thing I will say is, like, if you have a deadline, let's say it's today, and you say, okay, I need this done by next Monday, you don't have to wait till Sunday at 11:58 p.m. to send it. I mean, if you can get it done early enough, and it's done early, send it off, get it out of the way, boom. You don't have to wait always to the last minute, because sometimes things happen at the last minute and you don't get it in on time.
I think
That's great advice.
Sorry, is this not on? There it is. When we were in ad sales, a customer would send us, and we probably didn't get the volume of emails the news departments got, but we would get money. There'd be like, okay, we got $600,000 up in Philly. I need your avails and your proposal by close of business today, or yesterday, or early, by noon. And you got to hustle. And sometimes it's unrealistic. It's not fair to ask us to respond that quickly, but you do have to respond and say, I can get it for you by X, or you pick up the phone and call them, even better if you can get hold of them. But you do have to let people know you received their request, at the very least, because if you don't, and I feel like I'm dealing with this with my dad's accountant right now, and I can't, it's crickets. I go, do you have everything you need to file Dad's tax return? Nothing back, zero. I have to call them, which I find really appalling. But it's just important to let them know that they've been heard. Hey, I'm on it. I'm back at you tomorrow. Great. It's just important to respond.
Something I would add to that, Doneen, is don't commit to something that you cannot deliver upon. I can't tell you how many times I experience this every single day when, and regardless of the situation, where somebody's like, I'll get that to you on Friday. Friday comes and I don't see it, and I have high expectations. So don't tell me you can't do something and then not deliver. Now, if you commit to that, And then Thursday night comes, Friday morning comes, and let me know. At least let me know that you won't have it available to me until Monday. It's the idea of having that dialogue and that collaboration of request and commit. If I want something from you, you can say, yes, I can do that, or no, I can't, but I can do it at this point in time. And I think that we're so not used to having that dialogue anymore. It's either just a yes, 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 or I'll get back to you, or we don't even talk with one another. And that doesn't build your skill, and it doesn't build a high-performing team that you want to be a part of.
Do you
Customer relationship.
I was just going to say, at the same time, you'll get that pass a couple of times, right?
Couple of times.
A couple of times. But if it starts to become a pattern, then I think we go back to something.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, April 1st. I'm Shmita.
It is. You'll go to the point where you end up getting fired, if it happens always.
That's true.
I was just, oh, what?
I'm sorry. Just one thing I wanted to say about that is stuff happens. You know, sometimes you agree to a deadline for a story or whatever, a project, and something happens that will make that impossible. It's really important that you speak up right away, and let whoever you're working with know, whether it's your editor or your manager.
And it's okay.
And it's okay,
It's
exactly,
okay.
because stuff happens.
Yeah.
But I've worked with people who don't say something right away, and then you get too close to the deadline where you don't have any other options. That's when it gets frustrating, and that's when you do that too many times with somebody does that too many times with you, and you just realize you can't rely on that person.
It's reliability and trust. And those are foundations of being part of a team.
I once worked for a guy, president of sales at the Fox television station group, really bright guy, and he goes, I give my boss bad news as early as humanly possible, and hopefully with a solution, that's what I'm expecting from you. So if you can't do this project, I need to know quickly so we can regroup, and it was just great advice. I mean, you just got to do it.
And what you're talking about is, I think, really important, and I think the communication is obviously really key here. And do you think that, and because I think, speaking for myself, I think when I was new into the job market, I was scared, and I didn't want to let somebody down. So, how can do you have any advice for the students, like when you're in that position, how to manage that stress and to really like just go for it? I guess I don't know what the biggest kind of advice is to put yourself out there and be. It's okay to not be perfect.
It is so much easier to rip off the Band-Aid and do it right away than to let it linger, because then it adds to your own stress. If you had the stress of turning something in, and then you're afraid to tell them that there's you need a little extra time, then that lingers in even longer on you. Pull the Band-Aid off. Have that conversation as quickly as you can with your manager. They may be frustrated, but they will be frustrated earlier and can pivot and deal with things rather than wait to the last moment.
100% agree with that, but I also think there are going to be days, and prepare yourself for this, where you work until the work gets done. And there's going to be that, and it will be better if you do, because you will sleep better. If you don't work till the work gets done, you've got this horrible thing looming over your head. Of course, you're going to stress about it all night. You're going to wake up at 3 in the morning, although I did some of my best strategizing at 3 in the morning, I will say. But it will cost you your sleep. So it's best to just, rip the Band-Aid off if you absolutely can't get it done. But if you can get it done by staying 1 more hour, stay.
I would say, too, there's I think your question, if I understand, Doneen, was really focused around it's stressful and it can bring anxiety, and you're new in the workplace, and how do you even navigate that when you don't know what you're doing? And it's okay, right? I think that there's the idea that if you show up and you're proactive and you try and you roll up your sleeves and you try to just do the best you can, you will get grace from that, right? It's those that sit in the back corner and wait to be told what to do and want their hands to be held the entire way that will not succeed. All you have to do is show up and try to do your best and ask questions and recognize that we don't expect you to have all the answers. But if you're willing to put forth an idea, then we will coach you along the way. And from that, you will learn. But if you don't try and you wait to just be told, you're not showing that initiative, that tenacity, that resilience that we want. And you'd be surprised. Put yourself out there and ask for forgiveness later. It's okay.
Yeah, I think that's great.
People that will help you. There's colleagues that will help you. You can learn by, somebody talked about this in one of the panels earlier, or maybe it was yesterday, about keeping your ears open, just listening to the people around. Who are the good, I used to tell my sales trainees, I go, pay attention to the good salesman on your team. Who do you think's the best one? Just by watching how they operate. I can think of mine, Anita Watkins, 1979. Everyone loved her. The station loved her. Her clients loved her. She was tough as nails. She could argue, but she always had her stuff together, and she just really did put her, and she was also extremely helpful to me when I was a newbie. Like, you're gonna be all right, you can do it this way. So there's always someone to reach out to, don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, one of the things we used to do, or we still do, is when somebody comes into the newsroom or to the shop, we assign a station buddy. And if somebody's not assigning you a buddy, find somebody. Find a buddy and latch on and say, hey, can I get 5 minutes of your day? And just, develop that relationship so that if something comes up and you have a tough question, you can go to them and say, okay, this is what's happening. How do I address this? They'll give you, if they're really in it for the right reasons, they'll give you that conversation back and forth and help you grow, in your career.
Yeah.
If you do all these things that we're discussing and you build the trust with a customer, when you do make a mistake, they'll forgive you. Mm-hmm. I can think of a time in Chicago, I had a big radio station as my client. They bought a lot of time on our TV station. And every year, I sold them the American Music Awards, the mid-break. And they loved that. And I sold it to them again. And all of a sudden, the format came in, and that thing didn't exist. And I had a 15-second spot with a 30-second hole. And I thought I could make it work, so I sat on it. I was pretty experienced at this point. Sat on it. I thought, I know I can shove it back in. I can talk my boss into it. Well, at the very 11th hour, he said, you're not getting in. And I had to call that agency and the client and apologize and say, I can't get you in. Here's what I can give you. And they go, you've taken such good care of us this one time. It's okay. I was so grateful, never forgot them. But they will forgive you. If I would always go the extra mile for them up until that point. And so I also learned not to dance on my issues. Don't just try to slide it in, it might not work out.
Great. When we were kind of preparing for this panel, one of the things, you guys, I think pretty much everybody kind of said was something that's important about professionalism in the workplace is to be prepared. Can you talk a little bit about how preparation can really help you excel in your career paths?
And I think Harry Smith said it at lunch, you cannot over-prepare for something. So if you're preparing for a conversation with your boss, or you're preparing for an interview like all of you are about to do, go on that website for the company you're interviewing with, go on Glassdoor, go on LinkedIn, look at the questions they get, look at their press releases. Do they have a new product that they're touting? So you can ask a smart question in the interview. I used to also coach people to look at their investor relation page. What's Wall Street saying about the company? Is it a good one to go to? There's so many things, and you can ask smart questions in the interview because we're all going to say, do you have any questions? And if you say no, we're like, well, did they do any homework? And I used to, when that would happen in interviews with young hires, I would say, well, just tell me what homework you did to prepare for this job interview. And they'd look at me like I had 3 heads. And so I'd like, if you didn't do any, you're not that interested in what we do for a living. How do you know that you'd be appropriate, or that, how do you know this is a good job for you? Did you just apply online randomly? I'm really not looking for that person. So I think and when you're talking to your boss, a lot of times you're not going to win that conversation. But if you put some thought into it and you talked about the research you did to come up with your suggestion, they're at least going to look at you as somebody who's thinking. We all want thinkers. We want people that have an idea and have been willing to do the work to get there. So I would say you can't go wrong when you prepare.
Yeah, I'll as a hiring person, if I ask you a question and say, hey, do you have any questions? And you say nothing, that goes on my list as that's not good, okay? And that means whatever else you've done, you've got to get up higher to overcome that if you can. I think The other thing I would do is you all should have a LinkedIn page at this point in your careers, even if you're in college. Check your LinkedIn to see if there's anybody who's connected to them, to you, who has worked with them, and ping them and say, hey, we're connected as friends on LinkedIn. I'm about to apply for this job. You worked there at some point. Any tips? And a lot of folks will share that kind of information with you.
And Cougs will definitely share that information with you. If for any company you're interviewing, if you go into LinkedIn and look at what Cougs already work there, they will take your call and they will help you out.
One thing that I would just like to add is it's obvious when you're prepared for something, and it's also obvious when you're not prepared for something. And it's so important. And one other thing that goes into that also with preparation and organization is managing your time effectively. Again, when you're working on a project or a story or applying for a job, managing your time effectively is part of your preparation. And when you're prepared to write the story, it comes through in your story, or broadcast the story, it comes through in your story. And people can see that you did the work, and you put the work in, and people who are hiring or promoting or developing people will always see that.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Marcia? No?
No, I do want to share something, but I'm going to see if you're going
Okay.
to offer
Okay.
something up so that I can share it.
Well, I did want to hit, because we were talking about resumes and stuff, and obviously a lot of you here are going to be entering the workforce soon. And one of the things that Liz was talking about was, you're going to see a lot of great resumes come across your desk, and that a lot of people can express why they want the job, but they can't express to you why they should hire you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
And I talked about this yesterday with some people that we were doing the career coaching with. I have seen so many resumes that look the same. They all studied abroad, they worked for a fine university, they had good summer jobs, and they're really glowing on paper. But they come in the office, and so again, if at the end of every interview, and my nieces and nephews look at me as the job whisperer, I teach them how to talk during an interview, and I said, okay, at the end they're going to say, okay, Jessica, we don't have any more questions for you. Do you have any for us? And I said, at the end, hopefully you've already asked questions, but at the end of it, you're going to say, when can I start? And she goes, I can't do that. It's too brash, and I go, okay, then say, based on our conversation today, would you agree I'm the right fit for the position? And what's going to come out of that, maybe right before you got to that comment, you said, here's why you should hire me. I'm dependable. Here's an example. I am a problem solver. Everyone wants solution-driven employees in any capacity that you fill. So when you're able to communicate the 5 things that separate you from everybody else on the pretty resume, we start to pay attention to you. And then when you try to close me, even better. I'm never going to hire you on the spot, but I'm going to say, right question to ask. And I remember that as I leave the room. Now, that one was aggressive and could tell me why. And then when you follow up, here's one more add-on to that. Follow up the next day. I usually look for an email in my inbox within 24 hours of the interview, thanking me, reminding me what we talked about and why you'd be a great fit for my organization. And then with the final, I look forward to further discussion as if you're just assuming it's going to go on. And if you've sold me on those attributes, why we should hire you, then I'm going to pay attention to that, because I can't tell you how many people didn't even send me a thank you letter. Or they sent me a card with a kitten on it. Okay, if you knew me, you would never do that. Okay, you didn't come to dinner at my house, not my birthday. I want a business communication coming back at me.
That is so you, Liz.
Great. David, you were talking about something too, actually, that I think once you've gotten the job is to make sure that your employers know what ultimately you want to do, because sometimes maybe you're not put in the exact position that you ultimately want, but if nobody knows that you want to move to some other position, you may not ever get there.
Yeah, there are a couple things. One, and the first thing that I want everybody to remember is the first job you get is probably not the last job you're going to get. So it is okay to go in thinking, I'm going to get this job, I'm going to be there 2 years, I'm going to move, I'm going to learn as much as I can, and then I'm going to go to the next one. That's okay. You do not have to apply for a job thinking that this is going to be it for the rest of my life, which means you can go to Iowa, you can go to Nebraska, Tallahassee, someplace that you're not necessarily thinking of. The other thing, though, once you get there, if you know you want to be a sports anchor, okay? But the job that is there that you get is general assignment reporter. Take that job, learn as much as you can, and then while you're there, have a conversation with the sports director and say, hey, you know what? Down the line, I really want to be a sports reporter. I know that there are no positions right now, but if there is an opportunity down the line, if it's a weekend, if it's something that you just need somebody to tag along and hold a camera for or hold a cable, they'll appreciate that. And if you're at the right station at the right time and they know that something's happening and they see your true dedication and you're doing your job, you have to do your job first, and you're doing it well, but they know in the back of your mind that, hey, this person wants to do a sports job at some point. You know, there's a Thanksgiving, there are holidays that come up where sports people want a day off, and, you know, there are some shows that aren't as highly rated, and there are some opportunities that will come up that you get a chance to maybe do a story or put something together and at least show the sports director that you can do a story. And then when an opportunity comes up, they'll go, hey, you know what, John, you know, has been hanging around us. He's done, you know, a couple of, you know, unique stories in the background. I think he's ready to get a shot to do one story. And if you are doing your regular job on a regular basis and doing it well, that sports director will also, you know, or whatever the position is, will go, hey, you know, this person is a hustler. They have the tenacity. Let's give that person a shot.
I think that's really smart about what you said about you got to do the job first, the first one you've got. I can think of a time when we had a sales assistant come into my office to pitch our training program. And I could tell her heart really wasn't in it. And I said, is this not what you want to do? She said, I really want to work in the news department. But everyone said you'd be a good person to talk to and it's a way to get promoted. And I said, but you've done a good job for Bob's team, right? Yes, I have. And I call and I make sure. And I said, you know what? I know the news director. He's just downstairs. Let me see if they have anything. So I pick up the phone, I call him, I go, are you looking for an assistant of any kind? Yeah, as a matter of fact, we are. I said, I've got someone you got to see. She went down, got the job, and then later got promoted. So sometimes we'll all help you. If you've done a good job for us, even if it wasn't the right fit for you, okay, I will help you find the right fit. I had another young woman in my office once who was my cousin's girlfriend or some crazy girl. She wasn't coming to interview for help, but she was really bright, and marketing was her thing. And I said, you know, I know a guy at HBO. I'm going to call, I'm going to make this, or was it CBS? I'm going to call for you. Are you guys looking for anyone? Yes, we are, and she got hired. And so it happens. You know, if you do a good job for somebody, even if it's not your dream job, you might lead you to the dream job, which I think was what David was basically saying.
Yeah. All right. The next thing I wanted to talk about is collaboration and teamwork, because it's obviously very important in all of your fields. And, you know, it's one of those things where I think, first of all, some people can be scared to share ideas. Some people can maybe take it personally if their idea is not liked by others. And also just, well, I guess we'll start with that part. We'll move to the next. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I've been dying to share this stat.
Oh, yeah.
I've got to share it. And it's not meant to scare you guys. So I'm going to share the stat. I need to read it off my phone. And then I want to tell a little story about it. And it will relate to collaboration and teamwork. So today, Gen Z currently makes up 30% of the world's population. And this year, it will account for 27% of the workforce. That's one stat. There is a study out there from Workplace Intelligence and the whole International Business School that says that although 98% of employers are struggling to find talent, 89% of those avoid hiring recent graduates. That's scary to me, right? It should be kind of scary to you all. However, being a part of the Murrow College immediately sets you apart from the rest. So I will say you have that going for you. But if we ask that question, why? Why are they not hiring Gen Z? There are many reasons, but part of that boils down to inadequate skill sets. 51% say inadequate skill sets. 60% say lack of real-world experience. And 50% just say lack of business etiquette. lack of business etiquette. When we talk about collaboration and teamwork, being able to adapt in a new corporate environment is completely unknown to you all, right? You know how to collaborate amongst your peers. You know how to collaborate individually, online, right, via Zoom. But you get into the workplace where you have to sit in a room with someone, and how do you collaborate there? And something I will tell you, and I'm going to call some people out in the room, because I can. I'm not going to point to you, but if we're in a room and we're in a business meeting and everybody is listening and you've got one person in the room who's doing this or who has a laptop and is working on their laptop but everybody else is paying attention, that's not collaboration and that's not teamwork. It tells me you are not paying attention. And if I want to build a high-performing team, I need to know that you are attentive, that you're using your critical listening skills, that you are providing feedback. Now, whether that's verbal or nonverbal, you may not be the person who always wants to talk. I don't care. But you should always be the person listening. And when you feel comfortable talking, that's fine. But I need to know that you're engaged. And right now, I see it all the time. I even saw people during Harry Smith's lunch on their phone, and I'm appalled because the man is an incredible storyteller. I'm like mesmerized by the guy. You know what I mean? I'm like, so, and he even said it, put your phones down. Now, I'm a total advocate of the phone, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, in a workplace, when you're trying to get hired into an environment, you've got to be adaptable to what the expectations of those hiring managers are.
Marcia, you hit the nail on the head with the listening part, because if you're listening to your colleague, your boss, people around you, you're going to learn something. You're always going to learn something, and that project is going to improve based on input from everybody. And it just gets you to the end result so much faster when you're a good listener. People always think in sales we're great talkers. I have people tell me that I want to be in sales because I'm really good with people. I went, well, that's great, but that's not really what it is. We need to listen to the client's needs first before we can even possibly come up with a solution. So listening, and I wasn't always the best listener when I started out. I was a pretty good talker. So, and still am. So I'm constantly reminded to work on that, but listening will get you to a better solution almost 100% of the time.
It allows you to be present. Right? And I think that's and it's hard. Dude, we have so much sensory overload in our world today. To be present is so hard. I'll tell you this little story. My mentor at Nike, she was an amazing woman. She, back to back, 10 to 12 hours a day, she had these meetings. And in every single meeting, she would go from one to the next to the next. And she had this incredible ability to be in the moment with the people talking about their problems during that meeting and leave all the crap behind that was in the previous meeting. Now, how she did that, I still don't really know, because I know that she probably had to work really late at night to kind of catch up on things. But you had this sense of she hears me, she sees me, she respects me, and she will be supportive of me. It's hard, but I promise you, if you learn that skill and then you in turn do it with others, you will reap the benefits of that.
And I was just going to say one thing to add to that is, if you're hesitant to speak up in a meeting, or you're not sure how to contribute, or to a project or a story, find someone that you work with that you respect, or that everybody else respects, and ask them. Or if you're in the right environment and you feel comfortable with your supervisor or your editor or your manager, ask them and say, I'd really like to be better at collaboration. I'd really like to contribute more in meetings or on projects. What can I do to do that? And people will be very, very happy to help you and give you some pointers and some tips on how to do that.
Never be afraid to ask a question.
Yeah, that's great. I do want to open it up for Q&A in a second, but before we get there, I did want to talk just briefly a little bit about, because it also kind of goes along the lines of collaboration, is how do you deal with coworkers that maybe you don't get along with the best? Because, sometimes in an environment where we're working with people for years on end, and you might become really great friends with some, but not very tight with others, and how do you manage the relationship? Because it's, you're at work, it's not friend time necessarily, so.
I think that's carrying yourself professionally, and you and I talked
Yeah.
about this before, about maintaining your professional approach to everything, to every project, every meeting, and listening to the person who you don't like too is smart. But it allows you to temper a bully, because you can't get to me if I really maintain my composure and I'm at work on time every day and I'm listening to my colleagues and I'm participating. And sometimes it's just I had a boss tell me once, Liz, it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. And really good advice, because I was probably emotional and strong-minded, and he goes, maybe just temper it a little bit. And it was great advice, because you again, carry yourself professionally, people are more likely to listen to you. And that is a way to gain the respect of the person maybe you don't. I think of a guy in New York that I didn't like his approach ever. I thought he was a bully, I thought he was tough on people, but oddly, he and I would always end up wanting to hire the same person. I'm like, how on earth did we get there? Well, it turns out he's not really a jerk, as I got to know him a little better. And so first impressions are one thing, really go in there and give them some attention too. And I think it allows you to handle those tough, tense situations. You're always going to have a tense discussion, and you're not always going to agree, and you're going to feel passionately about your opinion, and you're not always going to win.
Well,
So
you nailed it, Liz. I think that you mentioned something around that gentleman, and that was finding a common denominator. In life, there will be people that we get on with and people that we don't. That's just the world, right? And yet you heard Harry say, we have more in common than we do apart. So rather than think and focus on those things that you dislike or can't work with that individual, do your best to find that commonality with them, right? Because you never know if that person may someday be your manager. I will promise you at Nike, it happened all the time. If you end up burning bridges with somebody you didn't like, and all of a sudden they're your manager, that's gonna suck, right?
Or they're working somewhere else and they're in a position to possibly hire you for a
and
job.
they're not ever gonna hire you.
so,
So
that guy in New York's a really good friend of mine now.
So-
I mean, it's just
take
shows you
that
the
high road. I challenge you to take that high road, and while you want to react and you want to think about something negative, take the opposite lens and say, what can I find in common with this person? And then how can I create a relationship there? And how can I lead that relationship?
And even if they're not in position to hire you down the road, something that we were speaking about a little bit earlier, if you apply for a job somewhere and you and I didn't, I apply for a job and you and I didn't get along, and then the person who's hiring for that job sees that you and I work together, hey, what do you think about Paul? Well, I'm not so sure about it. And you got to think about,
What comes around goes around.
yeah, it might feel good to, say something to someone you don't get along with that feels good in the moment, but it's never a good idea. You should always be respectful toward everyone you work with and be professional, even if you don't like them. You're going to work with people you don't like, and that's just part of being professional, is finding a way to have the best working relationship you can with those people. It's easy to work with people you like, that's fun. But there are going to be people you don't like. You're going to have supervisors that you don't like. I've had mine. But if you're respectful to everyone, it can never hurt you. It can only help you.
I think you brought up a really good point about, is this not working? You brought up a really good point about what you say, and we can find out anything about you if you're interviewing for us. I don't have to look at your references. Those are going to be people that love you. I know enough people in the industry that I can make 3 phone calls and find out if you're a good employee or not. So if you've been a troublemaker in your organization, I'm going to find that out without even having to talk to you. Or talk to one of your references. So just keep that in mind. Media is a small community. And someone once said to me in New York, they go, you know somebody in every market. I go, well, I worked in a few, and then they worked in a few, and you develop this huge network of people. So yeah, if I want to find out if someone was any good, I just pick up the phone and call. maybe their former boss. So, and even if they didn't like you, if they respected your work, they're generally going to say so. They're not going to nail, But if you were a troublemaker, they're going to go, stay away from that one.
And one thing I wanted to add is conduct extends to social media.
Yes.
It's very important.
And email.
That one, don't overshare on social media. I don't need to see 5 posts and 3 photos from your trip to Starbucks.
And keep it private, by the way, to start with.
Right, and then be careful of what you say, whether it's about, any topic. It should be viewed in a professional lens because you're going to be representing that organization, and that's how they're going to look at it, and they're going to have expectations on how you represent yourself and the company on social media. And some people will say, well, that's my personal account. Doesn't matter. People still associate you with that organization, and so you have to be mindful of that.
Great. Is there anything else you guys would like to add before we move on to questions? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I just kind of want to know what the building blocks of your guys' careers look like. I know it doesn't happen overnight, but I myself set unrealistic expectations, and I'm sure other people do, of after college, and I'm like, oh, if I don't have it figured out right away, I'm just not going to figure it out. So I kind of just want to know how that went for you guys, how you guys worked up to the ground.
Well, I'll say I've had about a gazillion different jobs and career paths that have led me to running a news organization, some that have nothing to do with news at all. I've been on air as an anchor. I've sold used cars. I've been a bartender. I've done a little bit of everything. But what I've tried to do in every single job is get me to the next level of what I wanted to do. So even if I was a bartender for a while, I was bartending while thinking about what I can do to get to that next level. The fact that you just said, I have unrealistic expectations now, should be a little memo in your mind that should give you some grace, thinking, I'm not going to be, the next Entertainment Tonight anchor right now, but I may get there at some point. But the fact that it's already in your mind thinking that you already have unrealistic expectations should help you maybe temper some of it going up. The other thing I think a couple of different people have talked about is utilizing mentors, whether it is your student student advisory members here, whether it's your professors, whether it's other Cougs on LinkedIn. Lean on those folks to help give you some advice. You're not going to listen to all of it, but some of it's going to go through and will help you. And also, it's okay. You're going to have some bumpy rides for a little while. It's part of growing up and going through all of it. But you've got a wealth of knowledge from this school and utilize it the best you can.
I'll tell you something, a little story. So I had the epitome of unrealistic expectations. We were talking about this. Unrealistic expectations when I graduated from Murrow. I was a female, graduated in 1990, thinking ESPN was going to come knocking on my door. Boy, was I wrong. Back then, they didn't hire women, let alone I probably didn't have the skill. That said, I always had a passion for sport. And clearly I went full circle, right, to spend my career at Nike. We all have those unrealistic expectations. You are not alone. I promise you that. Now, what I will tell you is Elliott Hill, the new CEO of Nike, I worked for him years ago before he was announced as CEO. He told me something that has stuck with me, and that is, always think 2 steps ahead, Marcia. Always think 2 steps ahead. So the idea is, you may not know the specificity of what you want to do, but you may know the generality of what you want to do. In your current role, you may be that bartender, but you know what you will want to accomplish 2 steps ahead. So rather than thinking just what is next, what is next, what is next, and then not all of a sudden then realizing you're not getting to that path that you wanted to go, you have to think 2 steps ahead, and then what is the gap in between of the skills and the experience that you need to get to that future place. And that will help you set those realistic expectations of the skills, the experience, the demeanor, the professionalism, and what your future looks like.
I think the hardest interview you're going to go on is the first one, because if you start doing good work for any company, that word gets around. And people either inside the company or outside the company are going to contact you for the next job. I can think of a guy who, I went from ABC in Chicago to the CBS station. The people I was leaving told me I was crazy and jumping off a cliff. And they never promote anybody over there. You're never going to get promoted. You're going to like die in your job. I thought, well, that was really a nice way to exit. But when I got there, there was a guy who kind of took interest in my career, and I sold a huge sports package, like a $4 million deal in Philly. It was big, and I was a celebrity for a day, literally. But the manager at the station that I was working in, I was working for stations outside the market, took notice of that. And so he tells somebody else, and that person comes up to me and he goes, "You need to go down and have lunch with Sam." I go, "I don't even know him. He's kind of scary." He goes, "Go ask him to lunch and get to know him." It was good advice, because I finally, worked up the courage. I sort of crept in his office. "Hi, would you like to go to lunch?" And he did. He was really easy to talk to and fun. And then about a month later, the national sales manager job opened up, and I got it. I mean, I pitched him, but luckily I had already established the relationship. I think if I hadn't done that, he'd be like, "Well, she's too afraid to come down here." So sometimes it just happens. And you take the risk, and I also would, I guess, encourage you to take the difficult assignment. There's always going to be, if you could do something that nobody else wants to do or can do in your organization, you'll always be employed.
One thing I wanted to add to your question is, you want to keep your options open as much as possible. When I graduated from WSU, I was done with Eastern Washington. I grew up in the Seattle area, and I wanted to get back to Seattle. My family was there, my friends were there, my girlfriend was there, and I wanted to work at a newspaper in Seattle, which is still hard to do right out of college, but it was pretty much impossible back then, and it wasn't realistic. And I had some, I guess what you would call unrealistic expectations, and so if I had kept my options, it eventually didn't work out. I was working part-time at the Everett Herald and working at Red Robin in Bellevue, trying to get on full-time there, and at the paper, not Red Robin. It was a great job, though, Red Robin. I eventually realized that it wasn't going to work out, and so I decided to expand my options a little bit. I ended up getting hired in Walla Walla, which, to be honest, when I first got it, I was not excited about it. I did not want to go back to Eastern Washington. But I spent a year there, then I spent 3 years in Yakima, and both places were great. And I learned a ton. It opened up other opportunities for me at other papers across the country, and I've worked with just some amazing people that I never would have gotten the chance to work with or get to know, and many of whom are still friends. And so that's a big thing for me, is to keep your options open.
Great. I think our time is up, but I want to encourage all of you to find these 4 folks around while they're here, ask them any other questions you might have. They're a wealth of knowledge and happy to share it. So thank you all for joining us today.